Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the urgent question. To ask the Home Secretary to make a statement on the recent criticism of the statutory inquiry into the rape gang scandal.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As stated in my previous statement to the House on the 2nd of September and in my letter to the Home Affairs Select Committee yesterday, the Government remains resolute in delivering Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. These crimes committed by grooming gangs are among the most horrific imaginable, and her report exposed over a decade of institutional inaction, and we are determined to ensure such failures are never repeated. Central to our response is a statutory national inquiry under the Inquiries Act 2005, which will oversee local investigations with full powers to compel evidence. It will be time limited to 3 years to ensure that victims and survivors receive answers swiftly. The inquiry will examine safeguarding systems, accountability and intersections with ethnicity, race and culture, identifying failures and good practice. The inquiry will work alongside the National Police Operation Beaconport. The appointment of the chair is at a critical stage, and we hope to confirm the conclusion of this soon. Victims and survivors have been at the heart of this process with trauma-informed opportunities to share their views. We've engaged with them on the chair appointment and the terms of reference, which will be shaped by the chair in consultation in public, again, with stakeholders. As widely reported in the media, victims and survivors are meeting prospective chairs this week. Today, in fact. This process, contrary to the reporting, was not managed by the Home Office, but by an independent child exploitation charity, the NWG. We are gathering views to ensure their perspective remains central. We must avoid delays, as was seen in the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, and are progressing as swiftly as thoroughness allows. Misinformation undermines this process. Allegations of intentional delay, lack of interest or widening of the inquiry's scope and dilution are false. The inquiry will remain laser-focused on grooming gangs, as Baroness Casey recommended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This scandal arose because young, mainly white girls were systematically gang-raped, and this was covered up by those in authority because the perpetrators were mainly of Pakistani origin. So it's all the more shocking that when calls for a national inquiry became public in January, the Prime Minister smeared campaigners as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Comments like that are a disgrace and are what led to this scandal being covered up in the first place. Months later, just 2 days before facing a vote in Parliament, the government finally agreed to the inquiry. But it's clear the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Perhaps that is why, months later, the government has said nothing substantive publicly and their inquiry is descending into chaos. What we have heard publicly is that victims and survivors on the liaison panel have no confidence in the government and no confidence in the inquiry. In the last 24 hours alone, 2 have resigned. Fiona Goddard resigned from the panel saying this: "The secretive conduct and conditions imposed on survivors by the government has led to a toxic and fearful environment with a high risk of people being silenced all over again." And hours later, Elianne Reynolds also resigned, saying the remit of the inquiry had, and I quote, "been widened to downplay the racial and religious motivations behind our abuse." The Minister shakes her head. That is what Elianne Reynolds says. Fiona also raised the issue of Saba Kaiser, who has been acting as a liaison officer on behalf of NWG. Just 2 years ago, Ms. Kaiser described calling out the fact the majority of perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage as, and I quote, "destructive, distracting and irresponsible." Given those, frankly, appalling views and the complaints about them by survivors, will the Minister ensure Ms. Kaiser plays no further role? Victims and survivors have also questioned the suitability of former police officers or social workers to chair the inquiry.